ยะถานิยังปุตตังอายุสาเอกปุตตมนุรังเขเอวัมปิสัพพภูเตสุมานะสัมภาวะเย
Welcome, my friends, to Student of the Path podcast, 10-Minute Dhamma, number 3. Today we will be going over the second and last part to the question, what is Buddhism? Now, some people like to understand Buddhism as a philosophy. Let's go to the dictionary definition of philosophy, like we did for religion. Number 1, the rational investigation of the truths and principles of being, knowledge, and conduct, or a particular system of thought based on such study or investigation. Now, using these definitions, you could also understand the practice and the teachings of Buddhism as a philosophy, although I do feel like thinking about this in this way as just a philosophy is again kind of cutting things a little too short. Yes, there is an investigation of truths and principles, for sure. Part of that's rational, but not all of it. The main purpose, the main understanding of practicing for awakening, practicing for insight, is the development of experiential knowledge, experiential insight. So you are investigating your experiences. Rationality is part of that. It's not all of it. So, and you are investigating the truths and principles of being. Now, again, that's another thing that's important. The Buddha is not concerned with a lot of the metaphysical underpinnings of the universe and all these kind of things. He doesn't even go into a lot of details into how exactly karma and rebirth work and all of these kind of things. That's stuff that was pretty much added later. The most important framework, the most important understanding is that this investigation into the mind and the body and understanding things through our perspective as a being that is alive and has experiences. This is called the world. Everything that we can understand through these 6 senses. So, in that regard, yes, there is an investigation of truths and principles, for sure. And there also is a particular system of thought based on this study. So again, you can understand Buddhism as a philosophy. However, I would say, again, that is only part of Buddhism. And indeed, there's later works such as what's called the Abhidhamma, which is actually directly understood to be the philosophy of the teachings. This is where they go into things with more rationality and trying to fill in and flush out a lot of the things that the Buddha did not give details in. Some would say that's missing the point. Others would say that the details were needed and came later. That's a whole other thing. However, I wanted to cover this as a philosophy. So we've covered Buddhism as a religion, Buddhism as a way of life, Buddhism as a philosophy. And so I wanted to talk about what the Buddha's vision for quote-unquote Buddhism was. The term Buddhism is actually a very modern term. It was only coined by Westerners in the 1800s, as far as I understand. And you could probably say, looking back now, that the Buddha's intention was not to necessarily create a religion. Similar to how people say that, Jesus did not intend to create Christianity, right? However, there is a little bit of a difference in Buddhism. The Buddha did intend to create, at the very least, a community following a specific way of life. The Buddha wanted to create what he called the Fourfold Assembly. This Fourfold Assembly are monastics and lay people, men and women. So men and women monastics, that's where you have bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, men and women lay people. This Fourfold Assembly is what is needed to carry on the teaching of the Buddha into the future. Now, it wouldn't last forever. Eventually, it will become lost. That is the point of having Buddhas in the first place, that Buddha, and which I'll talk about in future podcasts. However, this grouping, this Fourfold Assembly, is what the Buddha wanted to leave, so that what he called the Dhamma and the Vinaya, or the teaching and the discipline. This is what the Buddha called his quote unquote religion, or quote unquote way of life, however you want to put it. He didn't say this is Buddhism. He said this is the Dhamma and the Vinaya. And the Fourfold Assembly's job is to pass on the Dhamma and the Vinaya into the future. And create a environment, to create a vehicle, a mechanism for people to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, to practice Buddhism, and to gain wisdom and to free themselves from samsara. So that was the Buddha's vision of what he wanted to leave behind. And of course, over time and over distance, right? Any idea, any human idea, religion, movement, whatever it is, over time and distance, it changes. It merges. You can see it in Christianity, you can see it in Islam, you can see it in Judaism, you can see it in Buddhism. How Buddhism spreads to different places and it merges with other traditions there, and things like that occur. And so, speaking of the Fourfold Assembly, I would like to give a sutta, the Maha Parinibbana Sutta. This is the final days of the Buddha from the Digha Nikaya. It's a very, very interesting, very good sutta to understand. Lots of very, very good material from there. This is Digha Nikaya number 16, Maha Parinibbana Sutta. And there's a scene in here where Mara is asking the Buddha to die, basically, to go, to end the final, to attain final Nibbana. And the Buddha says this. He says, I will not attain final Nibbana for as long as my monastics, so it goes through in 4 sections, male monks, male lay people, female lay people. So as long as my monks as long as the Fourfold Assembly are not true disciples, accomplished, disciplined, confident, learned, bearers of the teaching, practicing in conformity with the teaching, correct in their practice, living in conformity with the teaching, and have learned it from their own teacher, will declare, reveal, make known, set forth, open up, analyze, make plain, after giving a good rebuke, with reasons to the doctrines of others that have arisen. So what is this Dhamma and Vinaya that the Buddha wanted to preserve and pass down through the Fourfold Assembly? These are the 2 aspects of the Buddha's dispensation, his teaching. The Dhamma is the nature of reality, the truth, the teaching. So in here you have all of the knowledge and understanding and wisdom that has been passed down over 2,500 years from the Buddha through the disciples, first orally and then written down. These are where all the teachings are. The Vinaya is the rules for monastics, men and women who choose to leave the household life and become monks. This is where all of the rules, the etiquette, and the way of life regarding the monastics are. So the Buddha wanted this Dhamma and Vinaya to be secured and to be passed down for as long as is possible. And so we have now 2,600 years later, we have this Dhamma and Vinaya that has been passed down through all of these centuries from the Buddha to us. And so I think that this is a good cursory glance at what is Buddhism. You know, I may have said things that somebody brand new is listening to and they don't know what I'm talking about. These will be explained later, but I wanted to try to, as simple and as short as possible, within 10 minutes, obviously. We don't have too long of a time to go into great details, at least not now. And what I wanted to achieve in these two parts of explaining what is Buddhism was to explain to those looking to incorporating some kind of Buddhism in their life is a very basic understanding of the various ways that Buddhism is understood, especially here in the West and also a little bit in the East. So Westerners and those who are new to Buddhism can understand the depth of this thing called Buddhism as they take their first initial steps into this. And of course, Buddhism in some ways is easily able to mix with other traditions. So this is why we have people who are Christian Buddhists, Jewish Buddhists, whatever various traditions they are. They have their tradition that they were raised in, and then they implement some Buddhist principles and Buddhist aspects into their daily life. And there's people like me who did a full conversion and become a Buddhist. So with that, I think we will end this two-part session here on what is Buddhism. And the next section will be who was the Buddha. That might be done in one section. It might not. I'm not sure. But I think for today we are done. And I will see you in a couple weeks with the beginning of who was the Buddha. May you practice well and be well. Until next time, friends, Sukhi Hotu, which means may you be happy.